Hello, good evening, and welcome to Horror Makes Us Happy, the podcast where we ask the question, what is it about horror that makes us happy? Your hosts are Steve Becker and myself, Chris Whitman, and you can find out more about us at our website, horrormakesushappy.com. Before we get started, a little information for you and the listeners. Here are your trigger warnings. We're going to be talking about horror culture and horror movies, which could involve anything from murder, rape, suicide, child abuse. There will be F-bombs, C-bombs, D-bombs, G-bombs, and all kinds of other bombs. Except for Jaeger bombs. I'm still hurting from last night a little. So, if you or the listeners are not prepared for that, please take care of yourself and come back and join us for all kinds of chicanery and saying fuck and talking about evil things and whatnot.
Okay.
little warning, we do. We had it in a different spot of the show too before that didn't work out. It's more of a liability thing. We're going to be talking about dark things, so you always want to prepare the listeners just in case.
No, I get that.
So today's guest is Nicholas-Vince. He is a actor, writer, and artist and filmmaker, best known for his roles in Hellraiser as the Cenobite Chatterer and Kinski from Nightbreed. Thank you for joining us, Nicholas. Is there anything that you're currently working on or anything that you'd like to plug before we get started?
See, I love people who ask this at the beginning because then we don't have to worry about me. This is what I always used to do on my old YouTube show. Let's do the list.
Okay.
So there is, of course, Book of Monsters, which came out last year and is picked up by Epic Pictures and Dread Presents and is available on DVD and online. There's a couple of things from Hex Studios, Black Gloves, and a thing called, which they've just redone. It was done as a black and white originally, but they've redone it with color and a new sound mix. I think that's just come out recently. And then there is an anthology film called For We Are Many. That's there. And then there's my one-man show, which is my autobiographical one-man show about how I got into about a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So I make kind of anything I think that's in the show might be giving too much away. I may avoid, but generally we can talk around that. But yeah, so that's a stage show, and I'd had performances lined up, but obviously theatres are closed. So that's all kind of up in the air at the moment. Just waiting for confirmation of when I'm next going to be able to tread the boards with that one.
Yeah, definitely living in interesting times currently. I keep saying that, but it keeps ringing true. And I definitely look forward to the day that we can all go back to the movie theaters safely and enjoy watching people fakely getting their heads split open and dying and things.
Yeah. I think because there's that thing of sharing it with an audience. I mean, anyone who knows me and has had the misfortune of sitting next to me in a theatre know that I will literally leap out of my seat in fright. There's me and a friend of mine in the UK, in London. We have a thing called Fright Fest, which normally happens in August. Unfortunately, being delayed until October this year, obviously. But I've been going for the last few years, and I've got really good friends, one of whom is Mark, and his film company is Jumper in Row D, after his ability to leap out of seats. And one of our mates got stuck between the two of us, and he's, if one was leaping, the other one, it was not a good experience for him.
I guess in that case, it was a good thing you couldn't see out of the Cenobite mask.
True.
Well, I suppose but there aren't that many jump scares in Hellraiser. There is one that gets me every single time, and it's not like I haven't seen the movie before. But and I know it's coming. And but by that stage, I've got so involved in the story, I always forget, and then I always kind of misremember the timing of it, and it always seems to catch me out. And so, spoiler for Hellraiser, but there is definitely a jump scare towards the end of the movie, and it literally gets me every single time. So my mates laugh at me.
I just had a great visual though of you being on set in full costume, and another of the Cenobites walking up, and you just
never could have happened because I mean, two of us couldn't see. I'm sure Simon mentioned the fact that he couldn't see.
Yes.
Doug and Grace on the first one, Barbie on the second movie, Hellbound. We didn't have the time for that kind of thing, I think, to be honest.
Yeah, but just the picture of you being in full costume and doing that,
and just leaping. No, absolutely, absolutely. I think that
it is iconic.
Yeah. Well,
there was. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, because I was so tightly wound in either makeup and leather, unlike the others. I mean, I had, obviously my legs are very visible, but that was a very tight fitting costume. And, my movements were restricted when I was in that costume. So yeah, it would kind of be this full body leap up in the air kind of thing.
Many years ago, I was working at a haunted house, just, as an extra pair of hands. And leading up to the haunted house, we were supposed to take some of the people who were going to be our actors, who were all dressed up in makeup and stuff, and go hand out flyers. And we decided to do this, and we took two of the kids to a place called Chuck E. Cheese, which here in the U.S. is, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a pizza joint for kids. And they have like a ball pit and video games and things like that.
And horrifying animatronic robots and things of nightmares.
So we decided we're going to get something to eat because they serve pizza there. That's their big thing. And so we get a couple slices of pizza. We sit down in one of the booths, and I've got these two goth kids sitting across from me in full makeup. And out of the corner of my eye, I see, by the way, the Chuck E. Cheese is their mascot. And there's also a person in a Chuck E. Cheese costume that walks around greeting the kids and doing things like this. It's like a sports mascot kind of big mask of a big mouse. And I see him, he's seen these two goth kids. And so he's walking up very slowly behind the shoulder of one of the girls. And she catches the motion out of her corner of her eye, turns around. Ah!
Scared by Chuck E. Cheese.
Well, see, this reminds me of when we did Hellraiser. Yeah, it's when Hellraiser came out. So one of the things they did to promote the film was a makeup demonstration in London. And they had me in the Chatterer costume and full makeup. And they got me into it before they allowed anybody into because we were upstairs in a cafe in London, and in the center of London, and they got me dressed up as Chatterer, as I say, and then let people in. And of course, if you just look at Chatterer and I stand absolutely still, people just assumed it was a mannequin. And walked up to it and came up close, and then of course it's like, you make a sudden move, and that was great. That was a great way. And I remember then they released me and kind of loosened everything up, and I sat down in the audience, and there was a 9-year-old girl in front of me. So I just tapped her on the shoulder as well. My mum was there at the time. She said, yeah, she screamed, but she really enjoyed it.
Yeah, when we were at Chuck E. Cheese, this girl was 14 years old, and it was just nose right up next to her face. She felt the whisker and just freaked.
I'm really, really not surprised. I'm not surprised. Not surprised at all.
Never live it down. So, getting into the interview, all the stuff we're supposed to be talking about.
Oh yeah. You said you had some questions.
Yes. So, you know what? We didn't go through part of the preamble where we talk about So the way this is going to work is we basically ask the same sort of set of questions kind of 3 times. Once for your childhood, once for your teenage years, and then once for adulthood.
Okay.
Coming at it from different directions, sometimes it triggers memories that you'd forgotten.
Sure.
So starting off with childhood, what are some of your earliest memories of scary things?
First ever nightmare.
It's a good start.
Yeah, it's very clear. I remember this very, very clearly, and I was probably about 6 years old, and I dreamt that I was in a pet shop, and then for some reason I was lying on my back, and there was a crocodile on my chest, and I couldn't breathe, and I was having real difficulty breathing, and I remember waking up to find my father at the bedroom door, really concerned about me. And apparently what it was is I had whooping cough, and which, is dangerous when you're young. And it's quite concerning. And I was breathing and coughing in my sleep so violently, I'd woken my parents, and my father had come in to check on me. So I've a very clear memory of this crocodile lying on my chest and being unable to breathe. Yeah, so that's the earliest one. Oh yeah, and my mother terrifying me and my brothers. My mother was the sweetest lady. Really wonderful, wonderful woman. And most of the time throughout my childhood, my father was at home overnight, but a couple of times he had to stay overnight and work overnight, and had to do a couple of night shifts. He used to work at Gatwick Airport, and he was head of the weather office there, and had to do these night shifts. That left my mother with me and my 2 younger brothers. And I clearly remember, again, I'm probably around about 7 or 8 years old. And I don't know how best to describe these, but basically it's a thin wooden stick with a string that comes down from one end, and then there's a paper cone, and the string is attached to the head of a clay head of a snake. And when you flick this forward, the snake comes out, and it's got a corrugated, a concertina-like body. And of course, it looks like as if she's got a snake coming out of her hand. It does. And I just remember being chased around the house because we lived in a bungalow, and literally you could walk in a circle around all the rooms connected in a big circle. And I just remember it must have been Halloween or something, or, Mum, for whatever reason, Mum decided to terrify the children. I'm all right now, though. I have
many years of therapy.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are probably the earliest scary memories.
Okay.
Any early horror or scary things influences that you can think of? I mean, this is childhood, so probably not. But had you seen any scary movies then?
Oh yeah, no,
that inspired you?
No, I was a really strange child. So, I started off with the Greek myths and legends. So rather than reading children's books, I read Greek myths and legends, because most of the children's books were written by English authors. I just had no interest. Enid Blyton, particularly, was very popular with children. I tried reading one of the books and couldn't. Just thought it was terribly written. Such a prig as a child, but I really got into the Greek myths and legends, so those kind of wonderful monsters there. What were the earliest? I mean, it's teenage years before I started watching horror movies,
right?
Just because
sorry, go ahead.
Well, I say watching horror movies, teenage years. As a kid, I was reading ghost stories, reading collections of short stories edited by a guy called Peter Haining, and so on. So I was definitely reading those kind of anthologies.
Okay. And not every question is going to apply to every person. We just, have them because you never know.
Of course.
Let's see. Any particular ghost stories that you remember in particular?
There was, I've never found it again, which is really frustrating because I remember it's a great one. And it's all about a guy who lived, well, he was a stranger to the town, and he moved into this house that was next to the cemetery. People didn't like him. He was very much a loner. Soon after he moved in, a rich widow died and was buried in the graveyard. A week after she was buried, people noticed that the ground had been disturbed. And at the same time, the kind of rumors went around the town that she'd actually had her money buried with her. Mm. And come one cold, wintry night, the man he's living next to the cemetery is lying in bed, and he hears the door downstairs being opened. And then he hears the sound of footsteps coming up the stairs, and there is the smell of loam and soil in the air, and a figure flings open his bedroom door, and he's lying in bed absolutely terrified. And as he lies in the bed, the figure moves around the room, opening drawers and just looking in bookshelves until eventually this figure just turns to the bed and says, "You've got it!" I just remember this story being in this anthology and being a great story for telling when, you as kids, you're getting together and telling each other creepy stories. And I really wish I could find the book. It's not in any of the collections I managed to keep, so it may well have been one that I found in a library. But it's going to be the Pan anthologies of horror and Pan.
So were you, it sounded like there were at least a couple times here where you were actually definitely terrified of these things. Did you also enjoy it at the same time, or did that not come until later?
It's really interesting, isn't it? I think I read a lot, including an author, but my favorite author. Well, I read a lot of the Dennis Wheatley novels, the Satanist novels. So those scared me. I got into films by watching the Roger Corman films, the Edgar Allan Poe, Vincent Price films. Funnily enough, after this call, I'm going to be watching a Q&A with Roger Corman, which I'm very excited about, because those are the films that really, they were my gateway drug to getting into horror. So I liked being scared. I think by nature, I'm kind of a person who's interested in ghosts and death and all those kind of things. As I say, I was a weird kid. I started off with the Greek myths and legends when I was very young. And I was always really interested in the slightly more scary children's programs. We had some really good scary children's programs. We had one called Tarot, which was about a magician who could do real proper magic. And I remember we were supposed to go on holiday, a 3-week holiday to Europe. And I was really upset because that was when the new series of Tarot was going to start. And of course, in those days, there were no video recorders. You missed it. That was it.
No streaming, no anything like that. It's just you have to be in front of the television at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember getting really upset by not being able to see Tarot. I've never found it again. I don't think it's ever been released on DVD.
Or live action?
It was live action. Obviously it had the cartoon of Scooby-Doo. Loved that. Then I sort of worked out that it is exactly the same plot each week. And he would have got away with it if it weren't for those pesky kids.
And damn dog.
Yeah, absolutely. Ruh-roh. I'm really looking forward to seeing Scoob. Actually, I'm not quite sure if it's released yet. was looking for it online. It's not come up on my lists. So yeah, Scooby-Doo. I was trying to think apart from Tarot, what else was there? Yeah, so to answer the question, which was, did I enjoy being scared? Yeah, I must have been really fascinated by it. I mean, when I started watching horror movies, I discovered that as long as I got to the end of the film, I was okay. I would not dream about it. But if I didn't get to the end of the movie, and this was the same with TV series, I would dream an ending. In my mind, I had to finish it.
Interesting. Yeah, it's as if your subconscious makes up the missing part. So
yes.
if you leave it open-ended, your brain just says, okay, well, I'm going to take this time while you're sleeping to fill in the holes.
Absolutely. And I think those are the only times that horror movies actually gave me nightmares, literally physically gave me nightmares. Otherwise, I wouldn't necessarily dream, and to be honest, I watched horror, the sort of horror movie I grew up with was Frankenstein, the Universal horror movies, the Roger Cormans, the Hammer horror.
Mm-hmm.
So, rather camp, over the top, kind of stuff, but particularly with the Roger Corman stuff, Mask of the Red Death is my favorite film because it asks such interesting and deep questions about God, and if there's a God, why does he let plagues happen? Gosh, just realized how relevant that is today. So
topical, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't made that connection. So yeah, sorry, I've lost my track of thought entirely, which happens.
Yes.
Do you have any idea why it was that you were attracted to these things?
You mean apart from just being weird, a better explanation than just being weird?
Well, the way I look at it is, someone I knew a long time ago said to me once when we were having a conversation about, the things that she would do. And she said, I know I don't make any sense. But the funny thing was, to me, she did make perfect sense, but she just didn't understand the reasons why she was doing the things that she did. Like, to me, I saw it and it made perfect sense to me. So when you say, well, I was a weird kid, to me, that just says, well, you probably had reasons, you just didn't know what they were at the time.
Yeah, I guess. I can't link it and say, oh, this terrible thing happened, therefore I became interested in horror movies, because I was always a bit of a
but it doesn't need to be a negative. It can also be a positive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was as much interested in fantasy as I was in horror. I remember there was a book series called The Tales of Thomas Covenant. There's like 6, really, really thick books, 360 pages, thick paperbacks. And I remember there were 6 books, and I read them one after the other in 7 weeks. And mostly I was doing a book a week. I read voraciously as a child and an adult. It was literally, by the time I'd left home, I was taking over 200 books with me. Wow. And I'd read them all. I don't remember them anymore. The great thing is, Craig points out, my husband points out, the great thing is I can reread a book many times because I'll have forgotten most of what happens.
Like the joke about having Alzheimer.
Yeah. Somebody pointed out the other day that teenagers are as forgetful as old people. They just don't let it worry them. And I think
that is a good way of looking at it. Yeah,
it is. That's a great way of looking at it, because I've always decided, a long time ago, I learned that youth is an attitude of mind. It's nothing to do with age. Youth is about being interested, engaged, curious, and wanting to know and experience new things and find out new and learn. I love learning and doing new things. So, yeah, I think I was just kind of into all sorts of weird stuff, and I liked the fact, I kind of found reality rather boring. I guess it was, it's fantasy stuff, and I did read Lord of the Rings and as a teenager, and The Hobbit, and getting lost in these really fantastical worlds. I really enjoyed that. I just really enjoyed them.
It's funny you brought up Lord of the Rings because I was thinking about that a second ago when you're talking about, forgetting things. I can't remember which character says this, but one of my favorite quotes is "One thing pushes another out."
Yeah. I nearly used that line the other day. I can't remember. Obviously can't remember what the situation was. Just remember it saying you have to understand. Of course I don't. Oh, that's right. It was because we do during lockdown, we've been doing a film night. Some mates and I've been doing a film quiz night on Mondays. And it's great. Oh, it's really enjoyable. But I asked a question a couple of weeks ago about what the first acknowledged gay film was that featured a character who was obviously gay and was, very definitely told it from their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple of weeks later, somebody else, because of course we're in June, we're in Pride Month, and the question was, said, what are the first 6 movies about gay people? And I thought, I know I should know the answer to one of these, but it's gone because, of course, I wrote it down. Therefore, why do I have to remember it? I made a mistake when I was a teenager when I used to work in the school library. I realized I would never remember everything.
Mm-hmm. So then you stop trying.
Yeah, absolutely. I said, well, if I've got a library, I don't need to remember everything. There are these things called books. Uh-huh. I can just go and, as long as I remember where the information is and how to find it, I don't have to remember.
Chris and I both work in IT, and so we are very familiar with the fact that you'll never know everything, and that in reality you have to have access to Google, if nothing else, so that you can, research whatever it is that you need to research. Yeah. And it's a double-edged sword because, one of the top things that they love to do in interviews then is to hammer you on the piddly little stuff that usually you don't keep in your brain.
I remember when I used to work with I worked in computers for about 16 years at the same company. Oh. And after I left acting and writing comics, which is kind of within a year or so of doing Nightbreed, and I remember working with my colleagues, and they always had a chat window open so that they could chat with people who'd left the company, but who were still working on the same software. And so, but that thing about not knowing everything, I remember very clearly. Well, I remember the exact moment I realized I would one day die. I remember that I was in the lavatory at home, obviously thinking, as one does. You've got time to yourself to do this. And my grandmother had just recently passed. And I hadn't attended the funeral because I was too young. And we thought, we were being protected. I think I got to a reception. I remember it's the first time I'd seen Prawn Cocktail or something. And, I got to meet all my relations, but I didn't go to the actual funeral itself. Considered too young. But I remember very clearly this moment that one day I would die, and therefore I'd never read every book written. And I got very upset by this.
This unavoidable specter of death, or the end of it all. Just there's so many books I won't be able to read.
Yeah, precisely. Because I think in those days it was a kind of an attainable idea that you would, because there was the library, there was the school library, there was the bookshop in the town where I grew up, and those were the places where you got books. So the number of books in my life that I was exposed to was a kind of a quantifiable sum of the number of books that were available to you.
Not realizing that more were being added every day.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you had no conception of what universities were about or anything. I was young. I was around about 6 years old. Yeah. But yeah, so that was the first moment. And it's just like, I'm still kind of frustrated. And actually, then having read an awful lot over the years, I realized actually not necessarily missing out on stuff.
Yeah.
Can't remember where we were before I went off on that tangent.
It happens. Believe we're still in childhood. We've covered most of the questions: nightmares, influences, scary dreams. One we usually ask, which does kind of caveat depending on where each one of our guests grew up, was Halloween traditions. Growing up in UK, did you participate in Halloween, or was it even a thing at that age and that time?
Well, yeah, we had proper Halloween. We had English Halloween.
Okay.
Pardon us.
Not the Irish tradition, which was promoted by Christian clubs in America.
The US.
Mhm.
Yeah. You know the story. You know how your Halloween tradition started.
Oh, yes.
Not really. I don't. Maybe Chris does.
I mean, I did. Basically, it was the Christian clubs who wanted to explain to children about Satan and devils and demons, but also wanted to attract them to the Christian club and make sure there were fun, exciting things for them to do. So the whole idea of trick-or-treating is an Irish tradition brought across by the Irish to the States. But the whole idea of making it into a holiday on which now more money is spent than Christmas in the US was it was the Christian clubs, apparently. There is a fascinating documentary, the name of which entirely escapes me, all about haunted houses and which some of this material is in. But yes, I do remember we did have Halloween, but obviously no trick-or-treating or anything like that. What strange tradition. It's called bobbing for apples.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, where basically you put apples in water and you have to pick them up with your teeth.
Mm-hmm.
And as I say, my mother being chased around the house by my mother with a paper snake. I guess those... I think we might have had toffee apples. I think Mum made toffee apples. Yes, she did at Halloween. Mum made toffee apples as well as bobbing for apples. And then there was the tradition that as you peeled an apple on that night, and if you managed to peel the apple so the skin was all in one piece, if you threw it over your shoulder and looked behind you, the apple skin would perform the letter of the person you were going to marry. And, for an 8-year-old, it seemed an awful long way away. But yeah, I think that's the closest to the Halloween tradition before the popular. Let's face it. As I say, it's a great tradition. It means an awful lot to a lot of people, particularly in America. And I love the fact that I get on my Facebook people saying it's only 6 months to Halloween. We have something to look forward to, and so on. You get the countdowns coming up on my Facebook newsfeed every so often. But the only reason it's become big over here is because, of course, shops have worked out that they can sell very cheap plastic things.
Yeah.
They can sell tat, some people. So we do. We do now have people knocking on the door.
Did you? So I'm guessing in the proper English tradition, then no dressing up in costumes.
That's correct. Although I remember, I did write a play when I was about 8 years old, which because I got a glow-in-the-dark skull mask. From the local toy shop. So I remember writing a play called The Wizard of Sod, and using the word sod because my parents objecting to the use of the word sod, because of course it has two meanings, only one of which is a piece of earth, and the other which they were rather shocked that I'd chosen this word, and writing and bullying my brothers and neighbours into acting with it, and me dressed in this mask with a neck curtain on as a ghosty death. So yeah, fun times. But yeah, that's the only dress. That was that we didn't go around the streets at all.
Hmm. Was there something in particular about the act of dressing up that you enjoyed, being that you then got into acting?
Oh no, that was far earlier. That was much earlier. I mean, that was really early on. That was when I was at primary school. I got involved in performing then.
Okay. Did you have any group of friends? Like you mentioned, your mother, chased you around with that snake. Was she a fan of horror, or was there anybody else in your family who was?
Yeah, she was kind of interested. I think. Now, my memory is the reason I got to see horror films is that they were showing as I was becoming into my early teens, and therefore was kind of saying, I'm not going to go to bed with my brothers who were a year and 2 years young and 3 years, 3 years younger than me, because I'm grown up now. I want to stay up late. And I was kind of allowed to, on Friday nights, to watch the Marx Brothers films, which was screening at 10 o'clock at night. Now, my memory is, and the story I've told for years, is that they screened all the Marx Brothers films, and then the following week they happened to screen either Frankenstein or Dracula, Universal black and white. And the story is that they then showed the Universal monster, and I just happened... And Mum said, "Oh yeah, that's a good film. You can watch that." And that's where it all started.
You mentioned Scary Dreams. Was there anything in particular about the things that we've talked about here for your childhood? Was there anything in horror-related stuff? Was there anything in particular that you would say made you happy, that you enjoyed?
Sounds like all of it.
Yeah. Coming back to the title of the podcast, yeah, I think, as I say, I was a strange kid. I was a bit of a loner. It was the fact that you had sympathy with the monster. The monster is the good guy. I think that's the thing that I identified with.
Taking a page out of Nightbreed.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. The Frankenstein creature is a victim. It's not his fault he was created. It's certainly not his fault he's rejected by his father, effectively, and judged on his appearance alone. Those are things that kind of echoed with me. So I was always on the side of the monsters.
Interesting. Yeah, because it's almost like it can naturally go one way or the other at least in the childhood phase when seeing monster and scary movies. You can either be horrified and separated from them like they're the villain, or you can identify with them as the protagonist and almost feel sorry for them. They're misunderstood like that, such as Frankenstein monster.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean, obviously,
depends on the monster.
Depends on the monster. Okay, yeah.
And the time. I mean, for me, it's funny. We have a lot of guests that say like, "Oh no, I loved horror from the very beginning." And the question of happy or unhappy, or was it a good experience or a bad experience? Mine ebbed and flowed because from childhood, I was too young to have an interest in these things, and everything just scared the shit out of me. So it was did not like them as a child, but later on in the teen years, I started to warm up to them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it just, there's no one way. What I think is that people who come to horror conventions, most of the people I've met, it's the monsters they're interested in meeting. That's not to say that Ashley Lawrence, for example, isn't hugely popular, and she's the heroine of the movie, or Claire or anybody else of the cast from Hellraiser. But obviously, it's the people who you tend to see on the T-shirts of the Cenobites from the film. Those are the people who really want to. They kind of connect with, and I think that I do find that interesting. In fact, that's fellow travelers in that sense.
Yes. So moving into teenage years, then. So you mentioned you started getting to watch movies in teenage years, but also books would apply. What from those years? What really jumped out at you as like, "Oh, these were my favorites"?
Yeah, I think this is when I was really reading Dennis Wheatley. I remember reading Dennis Wheatley under the bedclothes with a torch up until 3 o'clock in the morning, and then being wrecked for school the following day, and not understanding why am I so tired. But I've got to get to the end of this book because otherwise I'm going to dream something. And that actually that relates to later life. I was always a very, very sound sleeper until I read Red Dragon.
Yes.
And there's a part where, he escapes and he's out there, and I was living in flats in South London. And so
Brings it close to home.
Yeah, basically I was in my 20s by this stage. And somebody must have walked up the communal stairway, but I remember getting up in the middle of the night to check the door and make sure it was locked. And I don't think I've had a really good night's sleep since then. And it's just really strange. We moved our bedroom around a few years ago so that the bed, the foot of the bed, is now the airing cupboard where we keep the clothes. It's the closet. It's a walk-in closet, basically. I cannot go to sleep unless that door is closed, and it has to be properly closed.
Yes, not slightly ajar or even cracked.
And if I have seen too many American movies, it's just, I've seen. Obviously, it has it's planted deep in my mind. Some things, but I can't. I just can't do it. It really worries me if that door is open, and if falling into bed and then turning over and go, oh no, I've got to get up again, so I've got to close the door.
Yeah, we've all been there. That moment where you get perfectly in bed, you're all nice and snug, and then you see the door out of the corner of your eye, like, God damn it.
Yeah, absolutely. So in teenage years, I think it was. This is obviously when I was watching Roger Corman films. This is when I was reading Dennis Wheatley. Says that the devil rides out, to the devil a daughter. These are the things that were kind of interesting me, and those are the ones that really stand out.
Yeah.
Question about the Dennis Wheatley. You said Wheatley, I think it was?
Wheatley.
Okay.
Yeah.
You had also mentioned that when we were talking about the childhood stuff. Did you also read them like crossing over from childhood into teenage years, or was it just?
No, I will have skipped. It would have been when I was a teenager.
Okay.
I don't think as a young. I mean, I probably around about mid-teens. I would have thought, because I would have bought the paperbacks myself, and I think it would have raised a few eyebrows if like a 10-year-old.
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
No, I must have been a teenager.
Because when you mentioned that in the childhood part, I was like, wait, you said they were Satanist books? That's
no, it's like I do. The other book, of course, was Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula. I remember reading it and then losing it at school and having to go to the school office and get it. And so again, I'm probably around about 15, 16, and the school secretary looking at me and saying, how can you read such a scary book? And I'm thinking, well, obviously the sex. Didn't actually say that. It was like,
no, that would have been a perfectly acceptable answer.
Yeah. It's Dracula. It's about sex. So I think. So Dracula, Dennis Wheatley. Yeah, those are the main things.
So it sounds like you were starting to have other reasons to be excited by these now.
Yeah.
Let's see. Any other interesting things about? You mentioned The Devil Rides Out. I'm not familiar with that one.
Oh, it's there's a Hammer horror film starring Christopher Lee, and Charles Gray as the Satanist.
And what did you like about that one?
I just think the fact it was filmed, and it's many years since I've read these books, so I remember the titles. I remember I kind of enjoyed them. They were interesting. I think there's another Dennis Wheatley called The Car of Gifford Hillary, which introduced me to the concept of reincarnation. So
Was it someone reincarnated as a car and possibly prior
sorry,
Stephen King? Like, are we
yeah.
discovering plagiarism here?
Sorry, this is the car spelt Ka.
God.
As it
Sorry.
That's all right. That's okay. You're not familiar with the book. You're not going to. So Ka. So this is the Egyptian word for soul. Effectively, the car is the thing that travels outside the body after death and goes to wherever, But also, in this instance, it was the car of Gifford Hillary being reincarnated.
Okay.
As far as I remember.
Both enlightened and embarrassed for myself.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah, I think those are the ones I remember. But I also remember reading H.H. Munro's short stories, who is most commonly known as Saki, Saki. He was an Edwardian writer, and he wrote actually probably one of the best werewolf short stories I've ever written, and the name of which might come back to me during our conversation, but I can't.
What was it about it?
Gabriel. It's called Gabriel Ernest. Gabriel Ernest.
Okay.
And it's what I loved about Saki is that he writes mostly humorous stuff, but also very dark humorous stuff. It's called the short story is Gabriel Ernest. He writes very short stories. Some of them are only about 4 or 5 pages long. But they're very they're beautifully written and very, very effective stories. Gabriel Ernest is the story of a guy who's wandering through the woods and comes across a pond, and there is a naked young man sunning himself on a rock in this pond who just starts chatting to him about what he's up to, and then obviously the man's embarrassed about this nakedness, because he's an Edwardian type, etc., etc. And then you just suddenly realize exactly who Gabriel Ernest is and exactly why local school children have been disappearing. Mm-hmm. It's a really wonderfully written story. Another one is Sredni Vashtar. Sredni is Sredni. Vashtar, Vashtar, Sredni Vashtar. Again, humorous, but very, very dark. And I really enjoyed those things. I like my horror, like Vincent Price, I like my horror with a sense of humor. But I also like my horror intelligent, which are asking deep questions and things about. I think the thing that really attracted me to horror is because it deals with the big subjects. It deals with sex and death, really. As a teenager, those are the 2 things that I was interested in. And those are the things that I found in the horror books and the films that I was looking at. It was okay. Well, particularly Mask of the Red Death, which I mentioned earlier about the fact that it's like saying, why does God allow plagues? Therefore, this earth must be the domain of Satan. Therefore, we should be worshipping Satan if we want to survive the Red Death. Great film. Really, really great film.
Yeah, I'm going to have to revisit that one. It's been a while.
Do you find intelligence to be a common theme, not even just through horror, but I guess you could answer it both ways, through the themes of the things that you like in horror and also outside of horror?
Yeah, I mean, I like things that make me think, will challenge me, particularly if they challenge my view of the world, if they make me look at the view of the world in a different way, then I think that is worthwhile. I think that's a good piece of literature. But yeah, so I think that, yes, intelligence, stuff that makes you think, makes me laugh, makes me look at the world in a new way, or just downright entertaining. I love Pixar. I love Pixar movies. WALL-E is one of my favorite movies, just because it references Hello Dolly. Another great movie. That's the stuff that I watch most of the time. These days, I think particularly during lockdown, etc.
Quick question, and something we forgot to ask for the childhood stuff. Did anything that you experienced related to horror in your childhood trigger any phobias or fears?
Not that I can think of directly. I mean, the only real phobia that I used to have was a fear of heights.
Mhm.
And I got over that by traveling to the top of the Eiffel Tower.
Oh, okay.
And in fact, having to go twice because the first time they'd only let you go up to the first section.
Yep.
Because there were strong winds. So I had to take another trip to Paris. Because I remember as a kid, I'd had this phobia. I'd kind of grown out of it. And then as an adult, I suddenly realized, I'm getting this again. I don't want this fear. I must do something about this because this is annoying me. So I traveled to Paris. I have a friend who lives over in Paris, so that is an excuse to go and see him. But I couldn't get to the top of the Eiffel Tower, so I went back 6 months later and got to and was absolutely terrified. And it was it was really funny because my friend couldn't come with me, but he had other friends over at the same time, and they went up with me, and they were obviously quite concerned because because the very last bit of the Eiffel Tower is a really small lift that takes about 6 people. Have either of you done it?
I have.
I don't know if you remember, but basically the top of the lift is glass, so you can see where you're going. And as we were going up that very slim part of the Eiffel Tower, you could see it swaying from side to side in the wind.
I don't remember looking up.
Yeah.
Yeah, they always tell you don't look down, but in this case, it's don't look up.
Yeah, it really is. Don't look up. And I remember we spent about an hour up the very top viewing platform, and by the end of it, I just thought, that's fine. I can deal with this now.
I'm guessing you had good clear weather if you were up there for
yeah, absolutely. Yes, we were very lucky. You could see all the way to Montmartre, and it was great. It was really fun. It was sunset as well.
Oh, nice.
So it was great. It was a really nice. I think we watched the church in Montmartre get rained on. It was that far away, but for us, it was really clear sunshine. And I think that's one of the reasons as a child one watches horror movies, because you've got to learn how to deal with your fears.
Yeah,
we're all going to be afraid.
It's,
as you know, I'm sure, courage isn't not experiencing fear. That's something different.
Yeah.
Courage is overcoming your fear and doing what it is you need to do or should do or have to do.
Acting despite fear.
One of the great things about horror movies when you're growing up is also, and they don't have to be horror movies. They can just be scary films, films that are made for children, which are scary. They're not horrific. I was watching Goosebumps the other day. That's a fun film. But there are moments which are genuinely scary, particularly if you're a child. You're a child. You've never seen an abominable snowman before, or you've never seen the ventriloquist dummy that talks all by itself. Dead of Night, other favorite film. Gosh, how can I forget that? Dead of Night. Have you seen it?
No.
It's an anthology. Okay. Dead of Night, British anthology, black and white film, stars Ralph Richardson. Basically, anthology. The story. What I love about it is not all the films, the ghost stories that are told, or the scary stories that are told, work, but a couple of them are really silly. But what I think makes it such a powerful film is that rather than just being one story after another, as you often see in anthology, there is an underlying story throughout the entire thing. Basically, the premise is that an architect has a nightmare where he meets a group of people in a cottage in the country. And he knows he's scared. He can't quite work out why this is scary. And then he gets up, tells his wife, and he's obviously shaken. He goes to his first appointment, And lo and behold, it's the house from the dream. And as he walks through the door, he recognizes everybody in the dream. And they, of course, they are just presented with the strangers behaving rather oddly, but they then start telling their own scary stories. The one with Ralph Richardson in is about a ventriloquist whose dummy decides that he's outgrown him and therefore wants a solo career. Dummy's name is Hugo, and it is terrifying. It is one because it's a psycho. I mean, that's the other thing. I was talking to somebody yesterday and they're saying how much they enjoy psychological horror, and that's the sort. It's just like, yeah, it's the horror, not of the thing that is going to get you, but the thing that you are presented with is really scary because the world is not right. And there's something very weird going on.
Yeah, that or it's just like the underlying just unknown. It's psychological horror is almost a double-edged sword for me because some things are unknown and you want the explanation of what it is just to have it finite or to know what it is, but at the same time it's more entertaining because there is that unknown that can't be quantifiable or defined. It's left open for your mind to entertain itself almost.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the horror. There's late teens, adult, Nightmare on Elm Street.
Ah, yes.
Completely terrifying. So basically, when I saw that, I was working at the Horsham Arts Centre where I grew up, where I worked whilst I was making Hellraiser. So this is late 20s. Yeah, no, so this is definitely adult. This is my late 20s when, I think it's 77 when Nightmare came out.
Wasn't that early?
No. It's earlier than you think.
Yeah, I thought it was in the 80s.
Maybe it's 80s.
Maybe it didn't come out here.
No, you're absolutely right. It's 80s, which means I'm in my 30s in that case. You've probably got IMDb up, one of you?
I am looking it up at the moment. 84.
84, yes, so much later. Okay, but that makes me 26. Okay, so I'm at the... it's because, of course, it came out before Hellraiser, quite a few years before we made Hellraiser. So I'm working at the local arts centre and the screening of this film. I'm working in front of house and we have volunteer stewards because in those days in a cinema, you had to have a steward by law. Didn't matter on the size of the audience, you had to have a steward there.
When you say steward, are you thinking in American terms?
Usher.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Usher.
Right.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah. So you got a cinema usher. And then, so this girl says, I'm not watching this. It's too scary. I said, like, fine, I'll sit in with you. Don't worry about it. I'm interested in horror. I'd quite like to see this. It looks kind of scary and fun. Mm-hmm. Basically, I held on to her throughout this movie. I was so scared. I was holding on to her as much as she was holding on to me. Oh, God. And then I remember we walked. She happened to live fairly round the corner to where I lived. So we were walking home together. And we said, God, at the end of this is talking about it, etc. And then we suddenly looked down and we realized that I was wearing a large baggy sweatshirt and a fedora hat. So my shadow, as we passed underneath the lamp, it was just like, oh my God, it's Freddy. And I think we both ran home after that. It was just like, what the hell?
I thought you were going to say that it was a striped sweatshirt. Or a striped
no. Yeah, absolutely. And if it had been, of course, we'd have realized earlier, but because it was just the way the light caught my shadow as we walked under the street lamp. And I just happened to be wearing a fedora and a baggy sweatshirt. So it's just like, it's Freddy.
So, Dead of Night, was that, I was slightly unclear, was that teenage years or adulthood?
Probably teenage.
Okay.
Probably teenage.
And I was thinking about something else. So you mentioned Red Dragon and how that did trigger some fears. Was that teenage or adulthood?
Adulthood.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think I've done teenage. I'm onto adulthood now.
Let's double check real quick. Let me run through my list here. So there are a couple in teenage years that we skipped over. Did you at that time then start having any friends or family who, as Chris likes to call it, became your horror crew? Did you have a group of friends who liked horror, or was it just still a personal interest?
It's a different world, and it was the access to films.
Mhm.
The only place you could see films were on television or in a cinema. There was no VHS. There's no cable. So literally the only place you could go and see those films. I didn't really have a crew who I went to see films with who would want to see horror.
Mhm.
I mean, we went to see things like Grease. I remember clearly, and there was only and these were my friends from drama club. I do remember we were at home. We were at my home, and they were screening a film, if you've ever heard of it, called The Night of the Lepus. Lepus. Which some of your listeners might have come across. It's a bad film. I do not recommend. I think it's got Doug McClure in it. No, Clu Gallagher. I think it's got Clu Gallagher. If you look up Night of the Lepus, but I think it's Clu Gallagher from memory, maybe in it. And I just remember the BBC announcer just saying, "And now our big bad bunny movie for adults."
Yep, I'm looking it up right now, and this does look like a big bad bunny movie.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just the most ridiculous thing. It's just, if you're going to have scary bunnies, don't make them 30 feet tall. Don't make them taller than a house, because your special effects budget does not stretch. It's just like so obviously cardboard houses these bunnies are just stumbling into. It's a not good film. It's just like, and I remember sitting there with my mates laughing our way through this and just saying, this is stupid, so bizarre. Night of the Lepus, the big bad, and this had been late teens, early 20s. It'd be late teens, early 20s. I didn't leave home to go to drama school till I was 21, so it would have been before, kind of between 18 and 21, because I've been driving. And it's just like the silliest. Yeah, I will someday. I'm going to sit down and watch it again just to remind myself. But all the reviews of it, I think it's got like 3% on Rotten Tomatoes. God knows what it's got. Right? Yeah.
Okay, so on to adulthood then. What you mentioned Red Dragon, Nightmare on Elm Street. You mentioned Goosebumps. I'm assuming you saw that as an adult because that was
well. It's just recently. It was come up on Netflix. Yeah.
I don't know that I would include Goosebumps in the list of top favorites. You just mentioned it, but what really has impacted you as an adult in terms of horror?
There's an unusual one, perhaps. Cabin in the Woods.
Okay.
Because I mentioned that I worked in computers for a long time. So after Nightbreed, I went on to write. I left acting and started writing comics. I wrote horror comics on Hellraiser, Nightbreed, and worked for Marvel UK and Epic in the States, writing comics. And then I kind of had to get a proper job to pay off all the debts. And I ended up in computers. And then I was made redundant in 2012. And the moment I knew I was going to be made redundant, I knew I wanted to go back to writing again. And I started writing on short stories. As the first horror film that I went to see after I made redundant was Cabin in the Woods. And again, I just jumped out of my skin and so on. But I really liked it for the nihilistic ending of
Yes.
that film. It's just like, yeah, this makes perfect sense. This is actually what would happen.
I know, right?
This is
almost
a
exactly
logical
right
choice.
there.
If the Chinese schoolgirls can't save us, then it's such a strange film.
Smoke a bong and relax.
Yeah, but I love the Cenobite character with the spherical puzzle box, and I like I like the references to all that. So I think that is probably
Depends.
yeah, and I think that is the one which had the most effect on me. But otherwise, I mean, I watched an awful lot of horror when I was doing my YouTube channel where I was chattering with Burman-Vince and I was interviewing filmmakers. I watched a lot of their movies. So there will be all those. But I think mostly what I go back to are the classic ones that I saw when I was a teenager, which I think is true for many people. That's not to say that I haven't seen some great independent horror films recently. This is why I enjoy going to Fright Fest, which I've done for about the last continuously, regularly for about the last 5 or 6. Well, yeah, probably for the last 8 years or so. Last Train to
Busan?
Thank you. I wanted to say Wuhan for a moment. I know that's wrong.
Horror story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also topical.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember just love it. That was the closing film. That was the closing film of the festival.
Were the writers or the creators of Train to Busan there?
I don't think they were, and it was shown as the very last one. So we were all heading off after 5 days of fun.
It's a good one to close things out on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to say, oh God, shoot me! Really great, fun guy. He made a film about death metal addicts or heavy metal fans in New Zealand.
Deathgasm?
Deathgasm, thank you.
Yeah.
Just wonderful. I actually didn't get to see it at the festival because I did get to see it I didn't have tickets to begin with, but one of my mates from Arrow Video got me a ticket. He said, "No, I've got a spare ticket, Nick, come with me."
Nice.
And yeah, absolutely. And I got to see him after. It's just brilliant. I loved it so much.
Oh yeah.
What did you like about it?
Because it's silly, and it's funny, but it's truthful. Mm-hmm. I mean, we talked about intelligence earlier on, and also heavy metal is nothing that I really know about. It's not really my kind of music. It's not anything I necessarily choose to listen to. But yeah, so I think horror movies, those are the 3 that spring to mind at the moment.
When you say 3, just to reference, you're talking about Cabin in the Woods, Last Train, and Deathgasm?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, those are the 3 that have sprung to mind and had in recent years.
If you like Deathgasm, there's one called, I believe it's Blood Punch. Same actors in it, and it's another New Zealand slasher film. It involves time travel duplicates, I think. It's an interesting watch.
Oh, that sounds fun. Yeah, that sounds really interesting. And I have to say, having chosen those 3, this is probably more to do with my tiredness. And there are going to be many when I finish this call fairly soon, I'm going to be going, oh God, I can't remember any of these things. And I should have remembered this one. How can I have forgotten that one? Because obviously, again, through Fright Fest and I've met a lot of filmmakers. I've been lucky enough to, since I came back to acting in 2013, things like Book of Monsters, worked with some really great independent filmmakers. So yeah, I can't mention things because I worked on them.
Quick question. What was it that you liked about Last Train to Busan?
How to set up your movie really, really effectively. Start with a long shot and you've got a guy and you're not quite sure what's happening. Oh, there's a nice, cute looking deer in the road. oh fuck, it's got red eye. Oh, I think it's a red eye that suddenly glows, and you realize there's like, and then we get to see a guy who is failing, who is just failing at being a father. He spends so much time in his business. He's he's an attractive character, because he's not an asshole. He's an idiot.
Yeah,
and he's not deliberately disappointing his daughter. He's trying. He knows he's doing something wrong. He's trying to fix it. He's no idea how he's going to fix it. And everything he tries is just throw money at it. And then it's just the claustrophobia of being on the train. I think after seeing that and walking out of the cinema, I said, "Yeah, wonder if anybody, we've had snakes on a plane, which I've never seen. Has anyone ever done zombies on a plane? Because it's the same setup, and of course they have. It's on IMDb. I've never seen it.
It's what you expect. It's zombies on a plane.
Yeah, but it's a great title, and it's a great concept.
Oh, yeah.
But I think I like the filming and the characters and the way the zombies move. It's just really interesting characters, and you're really rooting for the hero. You're really hoping that the nasty guy gets his comeuppance.
Wait, are we still talking about Train to Busan, or are you talking about zombies on a plane?
No, Train to Busan.
Okay, so it's also a zombie movie?
Oh, yeah.
Spoiler.
Yeah. Spoiler.
No,
within the first 2 minutes of the movie, it's a zombie movie. But it's a great zombie movie. It's Korean? I think it's Korean, South Korean. Great film. Very, very good film.
What I'm getting out of what you liked about that movie was mainly cinematography and storytelling. Or did I miss something?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, cinematography, storytelling, effects. And again, it's going back to Night of the Lepus. I think when I write horror, either films or short films or short stories, what I like to do is to make them feel as real as possible, and then you're allowed to change one thing.
Okay.
And see how that ripples and what the logical consequences are, and how do your characters behave in relationship to that. And I think what I love about Last Train to Busan, every single character behaves as a human being in that situation would.
Like they're not over exaggerated. They still go throughout their habits and their occupational habits, but there's also hobbies.
Yeah, I think it's all summed up in that beautiful cartoon. If where the guy's sitting looking at the TV or the keyboard, just saying, "If the people in horror movies would only just listen to me, they'd survive." And it's like a good horror film is not one where you sit and saying, "Oh, what was I was talking about another film the other day, and I said, this film is rubbish." And one of the other guys is saying, "No, it's a great film." And I said, "Listen, he just had to turn the lights on. Literally, the only reason he's scared is he doesn't turn the lights on. He goes out into the scary corridor in his home. He doesn't turn the light on." Stick together. Everyone knows that it comes up in Goosebump. Why don't we split up? Have you read your own books?
Have you not watched Scooby-Doo?
Have you not watched Scooby? Absolutely, precisely. Everyone knows that you don't. It's why I can't talk about another adult favorite movie, Scream. Scream is brilliant because I like the way that they deal with sequels. Timothy Oliphant
there with the movie within the movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Make one slight point on that topic before we move on, because we do probably have to wrap up here soon. But I do like movies, like horror movies, where they avoid that trope of why does this person make this stupid decision by having everyone make the proper decisions. And I can't think of an example of it right now. I think maybe Donkey Punch. Odd title, but good film.
All right.
It's about what it sounds like it's about, and the donkey punch goes wrong, and he ends up accidentally killing this woman. And it's how they deal with the body, and there's just horrible things that happen. So I find sometimes that movies like that aren't even necessarily horror movies are better horror movies than slashers, because people still make all the right decisions, but bad things just keep happening to them, where after the last scene something horrible happened, you're just like, what can happen next? And then this just tragedy falls into their lap, where terrible things happen and people die in brutally grotesque manner.
Yeah, I think this is the thing. If you can root for the character, because basically, as we all know, if it's your last girl standing or whoever it is, then another favorite one that I wasn't involved with, American Mary, the Soska sisters, American Mary.
Yeah,
See, I knew they'd start coming back to me. Absolutely fascinating. Just so well done. And just, I was at the end of the movie. I know the girls, and I was like, girls, beautiful women. Jen and Sylvia, and I was just like, I was upset. I didn't expect to be upset because she didn't get the guy. Because to me it's a romance. American Mary is a romance. That's the heart of the story. It's a very gory romance, but to me it's a romance film.
Maybe half revenge story, a little bit. There's definitely there.
Yeah, but it is. But I think that's the great key to it. And that's why I was so interested. Yes, it's a revenge story, but she needs what she is actually wanting is the romance, and this is her problem. She can't make her mind up. What's more important to her, and this is part of it. This is her tragedy. I guess is that she can't. She keeps on making the wrong choices, as we all do, because we're all driven by stupid, greed, anger, stupidity.
Hopefully you won't mind. I'll try to make these short. There are 4 or 5 short questions that we try to wrap up with. Now talking about your life overall as a whole, and not necessarily talking about horror, which movie have you watched more times than any other?
Recently, and I mean within the last 6 months, probably, because that's the easiest to remember. Guy Ritchie's The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it's hilarious. I grew up watching the TV series The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
I had forgotten all about that one. That was a Guy Ritchie film?
Yes.
Okay.
Henry Cavill and Armie Hammer playing the Robert Vaughn and David McCullum parts of Napoleon Solio and Elia Kuriakin. The homoerotic undertones that are just played on screen are there. It's the two. There's a wonderful scene where the two of them are arguing fashion advice for the female spy. It's just so silly and so much fun, and obviously loves its source material so clearly. It's a 1960s movie made in the in the 2000s, and it's just if you want to watch something that is going to take your mind away from what we're going through at the moment, that's it. The honest answer, obviously, the physical as an adult will be Hellraiser. I have watched that again. The great thing is, having watched it, I mean, I obviously saw it when it came out, but when and then when I saw it when it first came out, all I could really do was look at it and think, okay, that's the day on which we shot this. Oh yeah, that's Claire. That that's Andrew. It's really weird seeing these people I know, and oh gosh, oh yeah, no, I can see the edge of the makeup there, and so on. So there was a very different experience. Then after about 10 years, I watched it and they showed it on TV and I thought, God, this is a good movie. I'm now watching this as if I was just a member of the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just really enjoy it. I just think, oh, wow, okay. And then when I started making short films, I thought, oh my goodness, Robin Vigeon, the lighting cameraman, is a genius. You look at this, if you look at the shot where Claire Higgins or Julia brings back the first victim, for example, just as one example, where she's bringing him back and she literally hesitates between light and dark. It's so beautifully framed. You've got them on either side of the screen. You've got a stained glass window in the background. You've got light coming in from the front door, but there is darkness in front of the camera, which is leading up to the stairs to the room. So she's physically literally, and then you just think, wow, there are some moments in this film. You just think, oh God, that's, and you look at it, or I look at it in a complete, just to learn filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously climb. So, I mean, obviously, that is the truthful answer. That is the film that I have watched more than any other.
Okay.
Understandably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason we ask that is because, sometimes that gives, some sort of subtext. And in your case, you're underscoring by referring to Man from U.N.C.L.E. that, humor is a very important aspect for you.
Yeah.
Other than, horror might be the most common thread, but maybe other than horror, do you see any other common threads about what kinds of horror that you like? Cannibalism, occult, metaphysical, psychological?
As I think it's kind of, as I say, intelligent. Stuff that makes me think that it, is more than just jump scare, more than just a series of jump scares, which is why I think I like things like Scream. I like The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing, again, because it's the most amazing opening sequence. Because you are right there, from the opening shot that something is wrong because there is a helicopter chasing a wolf across the snow. What the hell is going on? That is some weird hunting thing.
Yeah, you're right. It gets the brain gears going right out of the gate. It starts making you think.
And then when you start, you got the superb effects and physical horror and weirdness going on. But again, the truth of that movie is about suspicion. Mm-hmm. This is what it's really talking about. Is about and fear and how fear breeds fear. So I think those are again, it's the ones that make me think.
Do you have any idea why it is that intelligence is so important to you?
Yeah, because I'm very intelligent.
Good answer. You had that one ready.
Yeah. That's such an obvious one. Yeah, because I've always been interested in. I tell you what, I frequently talk about my age because I kind of think, my God, I actually survived this long. Touch wood, intending to do it for a lot longer. But I've always said that my father, who died when he was 97, was one of the youngest people that I knew, because right up until the very end, he was always interested. He always wanted to know what his grandchildren were doing. He would have conversation. He was talking to them. He was having conversations with them. He was really, he was engaging with them. He engaged with new technology. He was fascinated by the iPad. He would, and so on. Youth is a state of mind, as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like lucidity might be important to you.
Second,
I said it sounds like lucidity is important to you.
Yes, yeah. It's got to be clear. Okay. Next one.
So now that we've narrowed in on some of the things that you enjoy, intelligence, humor, lucidity, last question is, why horror? Because there could be any other number of things that could trigger those things for you.
You kind of have two. You've got two ways of looking at life, and that is, you can either ignore the darkness, want it to go away, just avoid it as much as possible, and hope that you can stay in the light all the time, and you'll be okay. Or you can answer the question, what is in the darkness? Can I overcome? Is what is in the darkness a threat? Oh, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Mm-hmm. Oh, there's a possibility of a friendship here. Oh, there's something. Oh, I hadn't understood. It's not as dark as I thought it was.
I would say you can almost relate it to what you were saying earlier about the fear of heights. It's
I was just going to say
answering the question or resolving the problem by understanding it.
Yes.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yep.
We need to understand each other better, and we need to be not scared of each other, and work out that we do better when we work together. We live on a very small planet in an uninteresting arm of the spiral galaxy. This is such a small world. This is such a small world.
I'm going to say I agree with everything you said. I do see that there may be one additional relationship, which I'm going to suggest, and I could be completely wrong about this, so tell me if I am right or wrong. You haven't... Thanks. You haven't specifically said this, I don't think, but I think, having alluded to different points in the conversation, sexuality. I think you mentioned you had a husband. When you mention ignoring the darkness or asking what's in the darkness and facing fears, if you are gay, that there's some of that in that too, of discovering about yourself.
Oh yeah, I think absolutely. You're absolutely, and for example, we haven't really talked about Nightbreed. Over the many years, I've had gay people come up to me and thank me for being part of a movie that meant so much to them, because it helped them understand and put in context, and also hold out hope that there was somebody else who, I think, for many of them, because it's a movie where the monsters get decimated at the end. Where is the hope in this? But I think it's the fact that Clive had written of a place where monsters live with monsters and they're happy, and that they can be accepted by, they can just get along.
Self-identification.
Yeah, absolutely. And that there was a voice. Clive has a voice, and obviously, one of the hugest influences on me in my liking of horror is Clive, and I think I haven't alluded to it because it has to be a given. Underlying all of this is my friendship with Clive Barker. In terms of films he's advised me to watch or suggested that have come up in conversation. Oh, okay, Clive enjoys that, then I really should go that. Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. There are, well, as I say, next weekend, the Soho Horror Film Festival is devoted to Pride. So it's gay films, it's gay horror films.
Right.
So that there is a subgenre here, but there are a huge number of gay horror fans.
Yeah,
which is great. It's wonderful. I am among my people.
I wanted to be careful how I approach that too, because I don't want to come off as saying, "Oh, well, it sums up all of this because you're gay." But I didn't.
No, it is part of it. Right. But this is the point I was making earlier on. Every one of us has a different view.
Yeah.
but also what people want to do is to put other people into boxes, and because it helps them understand, and I get that.
Yeah. But that's why I said it the way I did. That
yes,
in addition to, not.
Yes, absolutely. No, you were completely and utterly respectful, and I appreciate that, and that was beautifully handled. Well done. But I think, yeah, we do. We like us gays. We like our horror. And I am not the spokesperson for all gay people. I would just like to point this out.
Also well put.
Yeah. But I do have to go, gentlemen. I've got 10 minutes before my next thing.
Well, thank you very much for your time, and thank you to everybody listening.
Yeah,
we'll cut the post pitch, and I guess I'll just talk to you outside of this and later on, and get whatever links you want from you. We'll put together a bio package.
Sure.
Thank you to anybody out there listening. Again, please do come visit us at horrormakesushappy.com. We'll have a schedule posted there to show who we're interviewing next, as well as a list of the people we'd like to interview. If you can help us connect with any of those people, or if you know someone you'd like to have added to the list, let us know. You can also become a Patreon subscriber and link to our social media or Nicholas's. In general, just come let us know how we're doing at horrormakesushappy.com.